So, good day. We're here to start the first chapter of Tanya. But as I said a moment ago, I'd like to look at Tanya here from a psychological perspective as well, not as a substitute. So I just want to read a Wikipedia translation of Tanya. If it's wrong, it's wrong. If it's right, it's right. I think it's pretty much right. Psychology is the scientific study of mind and behavior. Psychology includes the study of conscious and unconscious phenomena, including feelings and thoughts. It is an academic discipline of immense scope, crossing the boundaries between the natural and social sciences. Psychologists seek an understanding of the emergent properties of brains, linking the discipline to neuroscience. As social scientists, psychologists aim to understand the behavior of individuals and the emergent property and the groups. The first letter of the Greek word psyche, from which the term psychology is derived, is commonly associated with the science. I'm not going to read more, but basically, and you correct me, you're more professional at this than I am. My understanding is that psychologists seek to understand the inner part of the person that's not always revealed, call it the superconscious, the subconscious, and the inside, the brain, and all of that. What's Hasidus? Just Hasidus, Torah Baal Shem Tov. Before we get to Tanya, Torah Baal Shem Tov is the study of the Jew from the inside out. That's the difference between the Talmud and Halacha, which we call Nigla, the revealed part, and Hasidus. Hasidus says that although outwardly you look a certain way and behave a certain way, it doesn't mean that's who you are, as we discussed many, many times. So Hasidus also delves into the behind-the-scenes persona of the person. But the difference between psychology and Chassidus is a very important one, and it needs to always be remembered that Chassidus deals with the neshama, with the soul. Psychology doesn't necessarily deal with the soul, or it doesn't deal with the soul. It deals with the brain. In other words, there's the behavior, and then there's the brain. So, one second. So, this must be remembered, and I discussed this, and I heard this from Dr. Tversky Olav Sholem, and I printed it in several places as well. It's very important, because sometimes we get confused that we say Chassidus is psychology, Tanya is psychology. It's not true. It has psychological elements, and it feels sometimes like it's a study of psychology, but it's modus operandi. David, what Chassidus seeks to understand is the neshama. The soul is not brain. The brain is physical. The neshama is spiritual. Yes, Moshe.
You say that psychology, in addition to dealing with the brain, deals maybe with the heart, not the soul. But let's say an emotional element of the person.
You're talking about psychology or Chassidus?
No, psychology.
I read to you what Wikipedia says. I didn't see emotions, but I guess it also deals with emotions. That I have to leave for the psychologists, that's not my forte, But I believe that it also deals with the emotions, but I think there's an emphasis, the way we just read, on the brain. In other words, the emotions are subordinate to the brain. And by the way, in Hasidus, especially Chabad Hasidus, it's the same way. It's not that the brain is a substitute for the emotions, but in Chabad, the whole thing is moyach shalat al alev, mind over matter. So the emphasis is on the mind, how you understand something, cognitive therapy, cognitions. Okay, but let's now go into the Tanya, and I just wanted to give a little just general introduction. So let's go from Perek Aleph, page Hey, in every single Tanya. It should be the first page. Perek Aleph. Likuti Amarim, you see a top line, the title, it's called Likuti Amarim. Again, a collection of sayings. That's what the author calls it that. And this particular first section is Sefer Shel Beinanim, is the book for the average man, okay? And that's why over the centuries, when people sometimes ask, what are you studying? They would say Sefer Shel Beinanim, or some would even say Beinanim. Again, today it's called Tanya. Everyone calls it Tanya. But just know, historically, it wasn't always called Tanya. People identified it as Beinanim. Okay? And clearly, it's the Alter Rebbe. In other words, he didn't need to add the word Sefer Shel Beinanim. The Kuti Amorim. Right? He makes a point on the title page, which we learned at depth. He makes a point to say, this is Sefer Shel Beinanim. Why, Moshe? Because he wants us to know this is for us. This isn't for tzaddikim. This is for the average man. Okay. Perek Aleph, chapter 1. Tanya b'sei Perek Gimel Nida. We learned at the end of the third chapter of Nida. Mashbi Noisoi, we administer an oath to the soul before it descends into the world. Tehi tzaddik, v'al tehi rosha, be righteous and don't be wicked. We tell the soul, when you're coming into a body, you're coming into a child, to a fetus, you're going to be born, so get ready. Be righteous and don't be bad. Even if everyone lauds you and says, hey, you're a great guy. This is from the Gemara. You should be in your own eyes, when you begin your path, I'm a bad guy. I mean to say, I have challenges. Okay, bad in the sense of, not I'm a wicked man, but, I have temptations. And therefore, Hashem administers an oath to the soul. Be careful. And through this oath, when you make an oath, you're obligated. That's the whole koyach of an oath in the Torah. That although logically I won't be able to do it, the oath gives me koyach to be able to do it. This is what it says at the end of the third chapter of Nida. Asks the Alter Rebbe, B'tzarach Lahavin, we must understand the Hotnan of his Beit Beis. We learn, he asks firstly a contradiction from another Mishnah, Ethics of the Fathers of his chapter 2. Quote, it says just the opposite. The person should never consider himself bad. So how do we reconcile what it says in Avos Perek Beis and what it says at the end of Nida? That's a technical question, a contradiction seemingly between two citations. Now the Alter Rebbe says, let's think about it logically. Let's think about this piece of Gemara in Nida, which suggests to us we look at ourselves wicked logically. And he says, V'gam yibein of kedosha, if you will indeed be in your own eyes like wicked. Yeda levava, your heart will feel bad, you'll feel lousy. V'yia otziv, and you'll be sad and depressed. You won't be able to serve God with happiness and a gladness of the heart, which is obligatory for every person serving God to be happy at what he's doing. Can you imagine? What do we tell? You tell a child, you're terrible, you're terrible, you're terrible. He feels terrible. You tell a person the same thing, you can't do it, you can't do it, you can't do it. He grows up feeling, I can't do it. So here, the Alter Rebbe says, the Mishnah in Nida, with this instruction that you should look at yourself bad and wicked, is psychologically terrible advice. That's right. Now, and he says, what if you take the other attitude? And it's important too today. And that attitude is, I don't care. I don't care. Look inside. And if it won't bother you at all. In other words, the Gemara can say whatever it wants. So then, you can become a cow. If you go with the attitude, I don't care what the Gemara says and I can do what I want, you might as well throw everything out. If there's no discipline, and the Gemara is meaningless with what it says, it's some kind of thing I don't understand or I don't care for, then you're going to become a cow. And he says, chas v'sholom. So in other words, the question the Alter Rebbe is asking, the second question is, where's the balance? How do you balance, Moshe, the feeling on one hand, not to feel haughty and feel righteous, and on the other hand, to feel happy? And this is not, Yonason, this is not a question from the Mishnah. This is a psychological question, a rational question. In other words, a person is one person. How is one person supposed to think about himself simultaneously in two opposite ways? That's the question. Make up your mind. Who am I? So the Alter Rebbe says this points to the following. This points to a deeper understanding of labels. In other words, this whole idea of I am wicked, I am not wicked, I am righteous is labels. And the Alter Rebbe right here in the first chapter of Tanya teaches us Avram a fundamental teaching. Stay away from labels. Because labels will get you into trouble. And we all know that, right? Dati, Chiloni, Atzmai, Tzioni, that whole stuff. Stay away from it. A Yid is a Yid, that's it. A non-Jew is a non-Jew. And each has their mission, each has their avodah. Now let's see how he teaches us this message. It's going to be most of the page, or all of the page, the rest of this page, but it's important. The idea is, there's a Gemara that says, Hey Chalukas, 5 categories. 1, Tzaddik v'Toivloi. The first one is someone who's righteous and he has it good. You know, he has God and he has a nice large house and everything else. He has nice gashmis. That's the meaning in Gemara. Number 2, Tzaddik v'Raloi. He's righteous and spiritual and holy, but he doesn't have much gashmias. So it's bad for him. In other words, in his physical life, he doesn't have it well. Third category, Rasha v'Toivloi. Spiritually, he's a mess. He's a sinner. He doesn't care. But v'Toivloi, he got lots of money and everything else. He has, gashmias. Fourth category, Rasha v'Raloi. Not only is he spiritually bereft and corrupt, he's physically, he's a mess too. He don't have money in his bank account. So he's a loser from all sides. Okay? Then we have a 5th category, the Gemara says, Ubeinani. Someone who's average. A bissel, we say in Yiddish, a bissel from them and a bissel from them. A little of this and a little of that. Says the Alter Rebbe, Upirshu b'Gemara, that the Gemara explains, Tzaddik v'Toivloi, Tzaddik Gomer. The Gemara says that what does it really mean that there's a category called a tzaddik and good is to him? It's referring to tzaddik gomer, someone who's completely righteous in everything. And that's why Yoina said he's blessed with gashmias and ruchnias. Tzaddik v'Raloi, the category that he's a tzaddik, but he doesn't have gashmias, he's missing in the physical world. That individual is tzaddik she'eina gomer, an incomplete tzaddik. And because spiritually he's an incomplete tzaddik, which we don't know yet what that means, this will be explained later in Tanya, right? But the Gemara does cite these 2 sayings, tzaddik gomer and tzaddik she'eina gomer. Simply it means complete tzaddik or incomplete tzaddik. Says the Alter Rebbe, let's look at what the Zohar, how the Zohar HaKodesh, in a section called Uvaraya Mehemna, the loyal shepherd, referring to Moshe Rabbeinu, it's a section in the Zohar. Pirush, it explains, Parshas Mishpatim, in Parshas Mishpatim, it says over there, Pirush, Tzaddik v'Raloi. You know what Tzaddik v'Raloi means? Shehara sheboy, the little bad that he has within him, Kafuv, is subjugated l'toiv to the good, etc. V'chuli. So the Raya Mehemna, the Zohar, is kind of the first to give us an insight that what it means, a tzaddik gomer, a tzaddik eina gomer, is that part of the individual that's completely good or incompletely good. It means that it's either subordinate to the good or it's not subordinate to the good. And by a tzaddik gomer, it's completely subordinate to the good. By a tzaddik she'eina gomer, an incomplete tzaddik, there's still a little something that's there to plague you, to haunt you, to bother you. Well, the Gemara say Perek Tested Berachos, so the Alter Rebbe brings now support to that from a Gemara. It says, Tzadikim Yetzer Tov Shoftim. Tzaddikim, those that are righteous, their good inclination dominates. Rishoyim, Yechuli, Rishoyim, Yetzirah Shoftim. Wicked people, their evil inclination dominate. Beinanim, the category called intermediates, the average, Zeh v'Zeh Shoftim, both dominate, both the good and the bad. So again, what do we see from this Gemara? This Gemara implies different than the first Gemara. The first Gemara implies that it's talking about Gashmias and Ruchnias. This Gemara says, no, it's all talking about Ruchnias. It's all talking about Ruchnias. It's talking about who's in control, the Yetzirah over the Yetzirah, the Yetzirah over the Yetzirah, or a little of both. Amar Rabbi, another Gemara, Rabbi says, Kegoyin ano Benoni. For example, I am a Benoni. I'm an average person. Amalei Abaya, his prominent prodigy student called Abaya, said to him, Rabbi, teacher, Leshavik mar chaya l'chol beria. Master, you haven't left over any life for any creature. In other words, if you're our rabbi and you say you're also Benoni, so what are we? We are Rishoyim. And what does it say in Pirkei Avos? Rishoyim b'chayeyem kruyim mesim. Rishoyim, while they're alive, are called dead. So that's why he says, Rabbi's comment is, Abaya's comment to Rabbi is, L'shavik marchaya. You don't leave any life over l'chol beria, because life is not Rishoyim. The Gemara says if you're Rishoyim, like you're dead. And you're telling us that you're a Benoni, so you imagine what we are. So basically, Abaya is saying to Rabbi, come on, explain yourself. You know you're not a Rush. You know you're not a Benoni. What do you mean you're calling yourself a Benoni? If a Benoni means half virtuous and half bad. Therefore, the Alter Rebbe says, after all these remarks, well, so we need to really understand the categories. In other words, when he says these words, Avram, he means to say, we need to really understand the inside of man. The Rasha, the Tzaddik, the Benoni. What is this exactly? A little good, a little bad? In other words, if you just take it at face value, like the Gemara says, it's your behavior and your maisim, you're left with many questions as the Alter Rebbe asks over here on the first page of Tanya. These are all, most of it is Gemaras, and he asks very strong questions, and the implication is, even the Gemara, another Gemara that he brings, shows that we have to look deeper. We cannot suffice by saying that what the Gemara means, that it refers to just your money, is adequate. And I say the word adequate, a Gemara is holy. So the first Gemara is holy. But the Alter Rebbe says there must be much more to it. It's not just about how much money I have in my bank account or not, And how many mitzvahs did I do? And I told you, when the group of Lubavitcher boys came over in 1949, 50, from France, from Russia to France, and there was a Navardik yeshiva there. Famous Musar yeshiva Navardik. They did tremendous good throughout Europe. Mamash saved hundreds, maybe thousands of boys and Bochurim to lead a frum lifestyle. A lot to talk about Navardik, but not now. Anyway, so they came there and they saw there were tables, little tables, and a group sat here and a group sat there. So the Lubavitcher Bochurim asked them, this was in France, he's like, why? It was evident that you guys are split up. Is it because you understand the Gemara this deep and they understand the Gemara this deep? They said, no. We understand all the same. But those people that did 25 mitzvahs are at this table. 35 mitzvahs at another table. 60 averas at a third table. This is a ma'aseh that I heard in yeshiva. We knew the people. Now, it's not a put down, it's just a certain style. Like the Alter Rebbe here takes that style and kind of flushes it out. He's saying that technically that's true, but there's much more to it. Of course, how many mitzvahs did you do? But the question is, what's the teichen of the mitzvah? What's the content of your mitzvah? And maybe someone who just did one mitzvah and you did 25, his mitzvah is more genuine than your 25 mitzvahs. It's a whole different analysis. And the same is true with Averis. And I think about it, just extrapolate for a moment only, the same idea in yeshivas today. The star students, wow. The mediocre students, The students that are not interested, forget it. No, that leads to a disaster. When I was in yeshiva, Lubavitch Yeshiva, as a 17-year-old, we were all in one base medrash. And there were weaker people. The principal came to me and he said, I know you want to learn with a stronger chavrusa, but trust me, if you learn with a bacher who's weaker, it'll be better for you. And first I didn't want. Don't think I wanted. Here I am starting by learning to learn Torah, learn Gemara, You want to be with the sharpest guys, with the best guys. You can repeat the shir, or you could question. You know what I'm saying? And the principal was a Hasidic Jew and a very big Talmud Chacham, said, do yourself a favor. Take my advice. I listened. And he was right. Because by me having to explain the Gemara to someone who didn't have that background, it only made my knowledge and my effort to understand the Gemara much better. So the Alter Rebbe over here, going back to the Tanya, he says that if you look at these 5 categories, just as 25 minutes, 30 Averis, and a technical score, you remain with a technical answer. But if you want to find the essence of yourself, and the essence of a Jew, and the essence of a non-Jew, and the essence of the world, you have to put that aside. Okay? But I don't want it. We should walk away saying that a Gemara, the Alter Rebbe quotes at the beginning, has no meaning. It definitely has meaning. The Gemara, the way the Gemara analyzes the 5 categories, the first Gemara is, how many mitzvahs and how many averis. And do you have it good in Gashmias and in Ruchnis, or just in Gashmias and not in Ruchnis, or just in Ruchnis and not in Gashmias, or you have an average? But someone who is a mavakish, and every Jew should be a seeker, a mavakish, it shouldn't suffice. You shouldn't, it's like you go into a classroom with a professor and you shake your head. Yeah. What are you shaking your head for? Ask question. Challenge with derech eretz, or even to a doctor. You have a right to ask if there's a doctor. If you feel something's not right about a medicine, ask him, challenge him. Now, hopefully he'll answer. I said the same things with a rabbi. That's the whole gather of Torah, is to probe. When you do it with chutzpah, and you do it with outrageous, and you feel like, I know better than the doctor. I'm going to tell the doctor. Then I understand. And sometimes, frankly, I go into a doctor that way, and a smart doctor says, thank you, sir. If you think you know medicine better than me, then have a nice day. I'm the doctor. The same was with Torah. The same was in my learning over the years with Mashpiyim and Rosh Hashivas. I didn't find that to be the case. But again, because, I went about it with a derech eretz. When you go about it with a derech eretz, it's a whole different scenario. If the Mashpiyah, if the Rosh Hashiva, if the doctor feels that you're arrogant, that you're just making trouble, then they have a right to tell you, go somewhere else. Thank you. Have a nice day. So the Alter Rebbe here is probing ourselves and saying, what are we made of? What are we made of? Let's continue. The Alter Rebbe still continues asking. There's a pasuk in the Yiv, Bava Basra Perek Aleph. It's brought down in Bava Basra chapter 1. Ribono shel olam, Master of Universe, Barasa Tzaddikim. You created righteous ones. Barasa Rashaim, you created wicked ones. Chuli. That's what Eve said. Well, the Alter Rebbe asks, "What tzaddik v'rasha le'komar?" There's one thing that God gives a person: free will. whether you be righteous or whether you be wicked. Everyone has Bchira Chofshis. So what did Eve mean? Barasa Rishayim, you created righteous, you created wicked. Next question. The Alter Rebbe says, let's understand the very core essence of what we call a Benoni. Surely it's not half virtuous and half sins. Because if that were the interpretation, how did Rabbi make a mistake in calling himself a Benoni? It's known in the Gemara, he never took away his mouth from learning. The angel of death couldn't dominate over him. And the Gemara tells us the story, of course, that the wind had to come and he thought that the house is going to fall in, the tree is going to fall over. He stopped learning and went and gave a look at the tree. For a moment did he learn, the Malach HaMavos came and took away his neshama. He died. So what do we see? Avi, we see that this Rabbi was such a holy guy. He never stopped learning. So what do you mean he was half virtuous and half sinful? It makes no sense. How could he have made such a grave mistake? In other words, we know, Isser, that Rabbi was a tzaddik, but he was humble somehow, and he said about himself, he's a Benoni. Humble is when it's in the category and within the realm of normalcy. When it's total baloney, it's not humility, it's nonsense. So for Rabbi to say, I am a Benoni, meaning, and if the meaning is, I have half mitzvahs and half averas, you're a liar, Rabbi. You don't even have one avera. And the proof is God couldn't take your soul till he had to concoct an idea of a wind, and the wind came, and finally your soul left. So obviously, a Benoni means something much deeper. That's what the Alter Rebbe wants to prove here. He hasn't told us what a Benoni is, and we're not going to learn that today. It really is going to be developed in chapters 12 and 13 of the Tanya. But one thing is for sure. What he's doing over here in the first page is setting up a scenario that the literal meaning of the Gemaras need deeper understanding. Let's continue. He says, technically speaking, when a person does sins, he's called wicked. In the brackets, if later he does tshuva, then he's considered a complete tzaddik. Even if you just desecrate a most lenient law of the rabbis, mikre Russia, you're called a Russia for doing that. They give the citations. And even more so, someone has the opportunity to protest. He sees someone doing something wrong, and he has the ability to say, hey, what are you doing? And he doesn't protest, he doesn't open this up. The Gemara says, Nikra Russia. You're called a Russia. The Koshke, the Kalbchaim, needless to say, if someone desecrates a positive commandment, that he was able to fulfill. For example, and the Alter Rebbe chooses the hardest example of all, whoever has the ability to learn Torah every moment, next page, page 10, the rabbi's darshan about a person who's able to learn every moment and doesn't. Kitvar Hashem Baza, quoting a pasuk in Devarim, I believe, that he desecrates the word of God. He kaddish the kaddish. He should be cut off. He's going to die. That's for just not learning 1 minute, one time if you were able to learn. So Pshita, the Mikre Rasha Tvei, it surely somebody would be called a Russia much more than than just desecrating a rabbinic enactment. So Vim Kain, he summarizes his point. Al Kain haBeinoni ein boy afilu oven bittul Torah. A Benoni surely does not have even the hardest thing to watch yourself from, which is the sin of wasting a minute not learning Torah. Because if a Benoni has that, he's a Russia. And you're calling him a Benoni. Right? So the Alter Rebbe says, obviously, when the Gemara talks about a Benoni, it's not just talking about, a little good and a little bad because of all these contradictions. Obviously, we're talking, and especially Rabbi. Rabbi made a seemingly a ridiculous, ludicrous statement, and we know that Rabbi was a smart man, and he meant something else. So what does that prove? That a Benoni is not just someone who has half and half, like the Gemara says, but a Benoni in a sense is someone who's all perfect except, and that exception we're going to talk about later in Tanya. And here is with the Alter Rebbe, and we'll finish with this. Here's with the Alter Rebbe, lays the groundwork for his understanding of the 5 categories. And therefore, I want to conclude that when we go out in the street, when you walk down Dolev or wherever, and you're in a shul there, oh, he's a tzaddik. He's a Russia. That's a figure of speech. Do you know what's going on by him inside? Does he know what's going on by him inside? So it's a figure of speech. And that's why in Chabad, they were very, very ambivalent and hesitant to call people tzaddikim. It was like they didn't, and I'm very great people. So the criticism by the Misnagdim first and then the Litvische was like, you don't have the Chofetz the Chofetz Chaim. Chofetz Chaim wasn't a tzaddik. Rabbi Chaim Kanevsky wasn't a tzaddik. If you follow the Alter Rebbe, and there's so much more here, it's a different question. It's a different question. If Rabbi can challenge himself, the Chofetz Chaim can't challenge himself. Rabbi Chaim Kanevsky can't challenge. Are we going to say the Chofetz Chaim and Rabbi Chaim Kanevsky were greater than Rabbi? I'm asking you. Ask that question to anyone who challenge. Ask them, and if they say yes, I don't know what to say. So now their counter argument will be, well, why do you guys call the Rebbe a tzaddik? That's where they start. And that's a good question. It's a good question. And if a Lubavitcher gets angry while you ask the question, he's wrong. He's shallow. He doesn't understand what it says in the Tanya. Once you learn the Tanya, so it's not about the Lubavitcher Rebbe or the Chofetz Chaim or Rabbi. It's about the person. Every person. Of course, Rabbi was a tzaddik. And of course, these Gedolim were, very holy people. But if you talk about what's going on inside, to remove an urge, you know what that means, to remove an urge for any kind of gashmias? That's hard, hard of hard. So you can understand, coming from that perspective, why the Lubavitcher Chassid was ambivalent in just throwing out the word, throwing out the word. Yes, someone wanted to add. I think, Yonason, you wanted to say something? Yes.
Yeah, I run out every day, and they call me you are a study.
Okay.
No, you're studying. I said, okay, I'm studying for you.
For you, I'm a tzaddik. Exactly. No problem. We shouldn't make a big, what I would say is, come, let's learn a piece of Tanya together. Once you get into, I say this, he says this, it becomes a mess. Open up the Tanya and read about Tanya's word. Listen, don't think everyone agreed with the Alter Rebbe. I'm not saying everyone agreed, but at least Alter Rebbe was known as a special Yid, right? By everyone. The Rav Shulchan Aruch, right? The Alter Rebbe was accepted. Anyone else? Moshe, anyone wanted to say something? David, anyone? Isser? Okay, if it's clear, we'll end now. So we're going to learn again, Mr. Shem, Wednesday, okay? And maybe we'll have some more conversations. Sei gesund, Hatzlacha. Take care. Bye-bye. Good day.
That was it.
Thank you.